Good day, everyone! Before we present our topic, let me ask a question first. Is it ever okay to lie? Probably some of you will oppose, and some will say it depends on the situation. That's why we have white lies. But is white lie morally acceptable? For instance, you caught your classmate cheating on an exam, and your teacher asks you if he really cheated. Should you tell the truth? If we are to consider the consequences of the act of telling the truth, he may get a failing grade. But if we tell a lie, he would pass. From the point of view of deontological ethics, telling to your teacher that your classmate cheated is the right thing to do, even if doing so might affect his grade. Kant stands that telling the truth is always right and telling a lie is always wrong. Today, we will be dealing with Kant and deontological theories. I, Gaylin Ayo Aguilar, together with Kuya Rene Lapinit, will discuss to you this topic. And of course, we are the Group 5. Supposedly, Ate Almira Sulaiman is with us. However, due to the internet problem connection, she wasn't able to send the video of her. In deontology, the end never justifies the means. It's not the results that matter, but the process or action. It focuses on duties and principles. That's why it is duty-based. In fact, deontology comes from the Greek word deon, which means duty. The rightness or wrongness is based on the action itself. Therefore, consequences do not matter. In order for us to understand this moral philosophy, let us ponder first the life of Immanuel Kant, the proponent of deontological theory. He was influenced by Pietism, which emphasizes honesty, deep feeling, and the moral life. The work of Jean-Jacques Rousseau on human freedom, the concepts of rationalism and empiricism, and of course, the natural law intuitionist theories that dominated moral philosophy at that time. Let's move on to rationalism and empiricism. The source of knowledge, according to rationalism, is the reason. However, it is the experience for empiricism. Rationalists believe in intuition. Therefore, they stand that individuals have innate knowledge or concepts, but the empirists contradict. Intuitionism is the idea that humans have a natural faculty that gives us an intuitive awareness of morality. Act intuitionism and rule intuitionism are the two basic forms. Act intuitionism says that we must decide what is right or wrong in each situation by consulting our conscience. The conscience is our guide. On the other hand, rule intuitionism is we are guided by the moral rules. The moral intuitions are to God, to oneself, and to others. The absolutely good and without qualification is the goodwill. There are two kinds of imperatives or commands, the hypothetical and categorical imperative. In hypothetical imperative, if you want A, then do B. If you want to pass an exam, then study diligently. But in categorical imperative, act only according to that maxim by which you can at the same time will that it would become a universal law. Hypothetical imperative doesn't prescribe or demand any action. If you want X, then you must do Y. If you want to be respected, tell the truth. While categorical imperative is an absolute moral obligation or duty. You ought to do X, tell the truth. There are three formulations of the categorical imperative: principle of the law of nature, principle of ends, and principle of autonomy. Let me discuss the first one, and I will let Kuya Rene discuss the other two formulations. The principle of the law of nature is this: act as though the maxim of your action were by your will to become a universal law of nature. Kant gave 4 examples of the application of this test. that reveals contradiction. Though it applies on one, it would never work if others did the same thing, for it exposes unfairness and deception. Making a lying promise, committing suicide, neglecting one's talent, and refraining from helping others cannot universalize these maxims. Whenever anyone needs money, that person should make a lying promise while borrowing the money, results self-defeating. For there would be no promises at all. No one in his or her right mind would take promises as promises unless there was the expectation of fulfillment. Whenever it looks like one will experience more pain than pleasure, one ought to kill oneself. Is also self-contradiction, for it is against the principle of survival. We cannot universalize a maxim to refrain from developing our talents because absolutely society will soon degenerate into anarchy. And lastly, refraining from helping others cannot universalize also because in the future we might need some help. Not helping signifies selfishness and cruelty.
So now I will discuss the counterexamples to the principle of the law of nature. A counterexample is a specific example for which a statement is untrue. Counterexample number 1. Mandating trivial actions. Here's an example of a trivial actions that might be mandated by the categorical imperative. Consider the following maxim. I should always tie my right shoe before my left shoe. This generates the following principle. We should always tie a right shoe before our left shoe. This maxim is permissible or not obligatory because we could also universalize the opposite maxim, which is tying the left before the right. But it is justified by the categorical imperative. Counterexample number 2. Endorsing cheating. Another counterexample offered by Fred Feldman. It appears to show that the categorical imperative endorses cheating. Maxim states, whenever I need a term paper for a course and I don't feel like writing one, I will buy a term paper from Research Anonymous and submit it as my own work. Now, we universalize this maxim into a universal principle. Whenever anyone needs a term paper for a course and doesn't feel like writing one, the person will buy one from a suitable source and submit it as his or her own. This procedure seems to undermine the whole process of academic work because teachers wouldn't believe that research paper really represented the people who turned them in. And because of this, learning would not occur. Grades and transcripts would be meaningless, and the entire institutions of education would break down. The attempt to universalize even this qualified form of cheating would undermine the very institutions that makes cheating possible. Counterexample number 3. Prohibiting permissible actions. Another type of counterexamples might be used to show that the categorical imperative refuses to allow us to do the things that common sense permits. Suppose I need to flush the toilet, so this is the maxim. Whenever I need to flush the toilet and I have no reason to believe that it will set off the impairment or destructions of the community's plumbing system, I may do so. From this, we can universalize this principle. Whenever anyone needs to flush the toilet and has no reason to believe that it will set off the destructions of the community plumbing system, he or she may do so. Counterexample number 4. Mandating genocide. Categorical imperative appears to justify acts that we judge to be horrendously immoral. Suppose I hate people of a certain race, religion, or ethnic group. Suppose it is Americans that I hate and that I am not an American. The maxim is this: let me kill anyone who is American. Universalizing a maxim, we get the principle: always kill Americans. As with the shoe tying example, it would be possible to universalize the opposite, that no one should kill innocent people. Let's move on to other formulations of categorical imperative. So, we will consider the two other formulations of the categorical imperative, the principle of ends and the principle of autonomy. The principle of ends, one of Kant's formulations of the categorical imperative. The principle of ends requires that we treat persons as ends, as things of worth in themselves, but never simply as means, as valuable only as ways of obtaining something else that we value. It is morally okay to treat a person as a means and an end, both indeed. We often do, but to use a person solely as means to achieving our own goals is morally wrong. So, act as to treat humanity, whether in your own person or in that of any other, in every case as an end and never as a merely as means. The process would be as follows. First is formulate the maxim. Second, apply the end test. The third one, apply the principle of the law of nature, universalization test. The fourth one is successful moral principles survive both tests. The principle of autonomy. The final formulation of the categorical imperative is the principle of autonomy. So, act that your will can regard itself at the same time as making universal law through its maxims. It states that we do not need an external authority, be it God, the state, our culture, or anyone else, to determine the nature of the moral law. The opposite of autonomy is heteronomy. The heterogeneous person is one whose actions are motivated by the authority of others, whether it is religion, the state, his or her parents, or a peer group. The following illustrations may serve as an example of the difference between these two states of being. God bless everyone.
Okay, here we go to the problem of exceptionless rule. The rules that Kant's categorical imperative generates are universal and exceptionless. For example, your friend comes to your door asking for help. He needs to hide from a group of people who's hunting him down. You take your friend and hide him in your closet. Moments later, the group of people arrive asking if your friend is in your house. If you will answer based on Kant's advice, you will tell them the truth. Yes, he's in my house. In its consequence, your friend will be put into danger. This is the problem of exceptionless rule. There's no exception. And in order to alter, simply write in qualifications to the universal principle, changing the sweeping generalization. Never lie to never lie except to save an innocent person's life. But a problem arises too. There seem to be no limits on the qualifications that would need to be attached to the original generalization. However, prima facie duty approach advocated by William D. Ross is another strategy open for Kant. Ross is a rule intuitionist. His theory has three components. First is his notion of moral intuition. It is an internal perception that discovers correct moral principles and its application. The moral intuitions of more reflective people count for more in evaluating our moral judgments. Next is that our intuitive duties constitute a plural set that cannot be unified under a single overarching principle. Promise keeping, fidelity, gratitude for favors, beneficence, justice, self-improvement, and non-maleficence are the 7 duties. Lastly, is that our intuitive duties are not absolute. It means every principle can be overridden by another principle depending on a situation. The 7 moral duties binding each other, but when conflict arises, the weaker one disappears and a stronger one emerges as our actual duty. Prima facie duties aren't actual duty, but they become depending on the circumstances. Like, you promise to your parents that at 10 o'clock at night you will go home. However, you meet an old lady who is lost and asking for help to guide her into her home. There's conflict between two moral principles, keeping promise and helping people in need. But in the end, you decide to let the latter principle override the first. But it doesn't mean that the first one is not valid. Kant and the prima facie solution. A prima facie duty is a duty that is binding or obligatory, other things being equal. Prima facie is Latin for at first glance or simply all things considered duty. When we face with an ethical or moral issue, what we should do is must consider all things, and that is what prima facie wants to emphasize. We all have intuition. It tells us that we have a basic set of duties or obligations. For Kant, it is never right to lie, regardless of the outcome. But prima facie allows for the possibility that occasionally lying may be the most beneficial action. Always protect innocent life can override the principle of never lie. In the problem of posterity, we have perfect and imperfect duties. Perfect duties require precise behavior toward particular people, like the duty of telling the truth is a perfect duty because it mandates in each situation that I should be truthful to each person I communicate. While imperfect duties do not require precise behavior, like the duty of being charitable. Yes, I should help in need, but it's not an obligatory to help everyone in need. It's still up to me whom should I help. Utilitarianism and deontological system are different. Utilitarianism seems to catch the spirit of the purpose of morality but undercuts the justice in a way that is counterintuitive, while the deontological system put emphasis on the principle of justice and importance of rules, however neglect the central purpose of morality. William Frankena reconciled these two in an interesting way. It is a mixed deontological ethics. The principle of beneficence calls on us to strive to do good without demanding that we be able to measure or weigh good and evil. First, one ought not to inflict evil or harm. Second, one ought to prevent evil or harm. Third, one ought to remove evil. Last, one ought to do or promote good. Next is the principle of justice, treating every person with equal respect because that is what each is due. We need to use our intuition whenever two rules conflict in such a way as to leave us undecided on whether beneficence should override justice. Thank you everyone. Thank you for staying until the end. Once again, we are the Group 5 in Ethics Section E. Have a nice day everyone. God bless.